The blood on Penelope's hands had long since dried into dark crescents beneath her fingernails, but she barely noticed as she wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist and reached for another bandage. The mining accident had happened 48 hours ago, and she had not stopped working since the first injured man had been carried into her makeshift clinic on the edge of Ely, Nevada. The summer heat of 1882 made the small wooden building feel like an oven, and sweat plastered her dark blonde hair to her neck and temples. Her green eyes burned with exhaustion, but her hands remained steady as she stitched the gash on the miner's forearm. "Miss Harmon, you need to rest," her assistant Martha had whispered sometime during the first night, but Penelope had shaken her head and moved to the next patient. There were too many. The explosion in the copper mine had sent rocks and debris flying, crushing bones and tearing flesh. Some men had died instantly. Others lingered in agony on the cots that lined every available space in her clinic. She could not stop, would not stop, not while they needed her. The door opened again, bringing a blast of afternoon heat that made the oil lamps flicker. Penelope did not look up from her work. She assumed it was another family member coming to check on their injured loved one, or perhaps the undertaker coming for one of the two men who had passed during the night. Her vision blurred slightly, and she blinked hard to clear it. Just a few more stitches, just a few more patients. Then maybe she could close her eyes for a moment. "Madam, you need to step away from that patient right now." The voice was deep, authoritative, and completely unfamiliar. It cut through the haze of exhaustion that had wrapped around Penelope's mind like a thick fog. She finished the stitch she was working on before looking up, annoyed at the interruption. The man standing in the doorway was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that nearly filled the frame. He wore dusty traveling clothes, a worn leather vest over a faded blue shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. As he stepped further into the room and removed the hat, Penelope could see dark hair, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes the color of strong coffee. There was something in his expression, a combination of concern and determination, that made her bristle immediately. "I am in the middle of treating a patient," she said, her words coming out more sharply than she intended. Everything felt sharp right now. Her nerves rubbed raw by lack of sleep and the weight of responsibility. "If you are injured, you will need to wait. If you are looking for someone, check the list by the door. If you are here for any other reason, please leave. I do not have time for interruptions." The man did not leave. Instead, he walked directly toward her, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. Several of the patients who were conscious enough to notice watched with interest. "When was the last time you ate something?" Penelope stared at him, genuinely confused by the question. What did that have to do with anything? "I fail to see how that is any of your concern, mister. Now please, I must finish here." "When was the last time you slept?" "Again, not your concern." She turned back to her patient, dismissing him, but the man moved closer. She could smell trail dust and leather and something else, perhaps pine or sage from the mountains. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the scissors to cut the thread, and she cursed the weakness silently. "It is my concern when the only doctor in 50 miles is about to collapse from exhaustion." His hand, large and calloused, gently but firmly took the scissors from her grasp. "I have been standing here watching you for the past 5 minutes. You swayed on your feet 3 times, your hands are shaking, your eyes can barely focus. You are no good to these men if you work yourself to death." "I am fine," Penelope insisted, reaching for the scissors, but he held them out of reach. Frustration bubbled up inside her, hot and immediate. Who was this stranger to walk into her clinic and tell her what to do? "Give those back. I have patients who need care. And they will still need care in a few hours after you have eaten and rested." He set the scissors down on the far side of the table, away from her reach. "My name is Harrison Kane. I am a horse trader. Just rode into town this morning. The folks at the boarding house told me about the mining accident and about the lady doctor who has been working herself to the bone trying to save everyone. I am not a doctor, Penelope said automatically. It was a correction she had made hundreds of times since arriving in Ely 2 years ago. I am a nurse. I trained in Philadelphia before coming west, and I am perfectly capable of managing my own health, Mr. Kane. Right now, I disagree with that assessment. Harrison looked around the room, taking in the rows of patients, the blood-stained linens piled in the corner, the exhausted face of Martha who was changing bandages across the room. You have help here. Let your assistant take over for a few hours. Martha has been working as hard as I have. She needs rest too. Then I will sit here and watch over these men while you both take a break. Harrison crossed his arms over his chest, and Penelope noticed the muscles in his forearms, the strength in his stance. This was a man used to physical labor, used to handling difficult situations. I have done my share of tending to injuries, spent a winter with a Paiute medicine man once, learned a thing or two. I am not a nurse or a doctor, but I can change bandages and fetch water and wake you if someone takes a turn for the worse. Penelope wanted to argue. Every fiber of her being resisted the idea of leaving her post, of trusting someone else with her patients. But even as she opened her mouth to refuse, another wave of dizziness washed over her. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. The room tilted slightly and she felt Harrison's hand on her elbow supporting her weight. That settles it, he said quietly. Martha, is there somewhere she can rest? Martha, bless her, looked relieved rather than offended by the stranger's interference. There is a room in the back. It has a bed, and it is cooler than out here. Miss Harmon, please. Just for a little while. You're going to make yourself sick. I cannot, Penelope whispered, but even she could hear how weak her voice sounded. They need me. What they need is for you to be strong enough to help them. Harrison guided her gently but inexorably toward the back room. What they need is for their healer to take care of herself so she can take care of them. There is no nobility in working yourself to death, Miss Harmon. She wanted to fight him, but her legs felt like they were made of water. When had she become so weak? When had the exhaustion crept up on her so completely? Harrison pushed open the door to the small room she used for storage and occasionally for sleeping during difficult cases. There was indeed a narrow bed, unmade but clean enough. He steered her toward it. When did you last eat? He asked again, his voice gentler now. Penelope tried to remember. There had been bread, she thought, sometime during the first night. Or had that been the morning of the accident? Everything blurred together. I do not recall, she admitted. Harrison made a sound that was somewhere between sympathy and exasperation. Stay here. I am going to get you some food. You're going to eat it. Then you're going to sleep. That is not a request, Miss Harmon. You cannot just order me around, she protested weakly, but she was already sitting on the bed, and the mattress felt like heaven beneath her aching body. Every muscle screamed with fatigue. Watch me. He pointed a finger at her. Do not move from that bed. I mean it. If I come back and find you have gone back to work, I will physically carry you back in here and stand guard at the door. Under different circumstances, Penelope might have been offended by his high-handed behavior. But there was something in his eyes, a genuine concern that softened the command. He was not trying to control her. He was trying to help her. The realization made something tight in her chest loosen just slightly. Fine, she said, but just for an hour. And if anyone takes a turn for the worse, Martha must wake me immediately. Agreed. Harrison left, closing the door behind him, and Penelope let herself fall back onto the bed. Just for a moment, she told herself. She would just close her eyes for a moment, and then she would get back to work. There was so much to do, so many patients who needed her attention. She could not afford to rest, not really, not when lives hung in the balance, but her eyes were already closing, and the darkness that rose up to meet her was soft and welcoming. She sank into it gratefully, her last conscious thought a strange one, the memory of Harrison Kane's concerned brown eyes and the gentle strength of his hand on her elbow. When Penelope woke, the light coming through the small window had changed. Instead of the harsh afternoon sun, it was the softer golden glow of evening. Panic seized her immediately, and she sat up so quickly that her head spun. How long had she slept? An hour? 2? Longer? She had to get back to her patients. She had to check on the miners, change bandages, administer medications. What if someone had needed her while she was sleeping? What if someone had died because she was not there? She stumbled to her feet and pushed open the door, expecting chaos. What she found instead brought her up short. The clinic was quieter than it had been in 2 days. Several of the patients were sleeping peacefully. Others were sitting up, talking in low voices to family members who had been allowed in to visit. Martha was moving between the cots with a much lighter step than before, and she was smiling, actually smiling. And in the center of the room, speaking quietly with one of the injured miners, was Harrison Kane. He had rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms marked with old scars, the kind that came from working with animals and rope. His hat hung on a peg by the door, and his dark hair was slightly mussed, as if he had been running his hands through it. As Penelope watched, he carefully helped the miner take a drink of water, supporting the man's head with surprising gentleness for someone so large. "Miss Harmon!" Martha hurried over, her face bright with relief. "You are awake. Good. You needed that rest. How are you feeling?" "How long was I asleep?" Penelope asked, still trying to make sense of the scene before her. "About 4 hours. Mr. Kane has been wonderful. He has been helping me tend to everyone, and he even went to the boarding house and brought back soup for all the patients who could eat. Mrs. Chen at the restaurant sent extra when she heard what happened. Everyone in town has been so worried about you working yourself to exhaustion." 4 hours. Penelope had slept for 4 hours while her patients needed care. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming. I should have been here. What if something had happened? Nothing happened except that these men got the care they needed and you got the rest you desperately required. Harrison had finished with the miner and was walking toward her now. In his hands he carried a bowl of soup and a piece of bread. "You look better. Some of the color has come back to your face. Now you need to eat this." "I need to check on my patients first," Penelope said, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. She could not remember the last time she had felt truly hungry. Exhaustion had a way of suppressing appetite, but now that she had slept, her body was making its needs known quite emphatically. "Your patients are stable. I checked on each one of them within the last half hour. Martha has been doing an excellent job. The 2 men in the corner have fevers, but we have been keeping them cool with wet cloths. The man by the window is in pain, so I gave him a dose of laudanum based on the measurements on the bottle. The man who was coughing earlier has settled down after some water with honey. Everyone else is either sleeping or comfortable." Harrison held out the bowl. "Now eat." Penelope took the bowl, partly because the smell of the soup was making her mouth water, and partly because she could see there would be no arguing with this stubborn man. She sat down on one of the few chairs in the room and took a spoonful. The broth was rich with vegetables and bits of chicken, and it tasted like the most delicious thing she had ever eaten. She had not realized how desperately her body needed nourishment. "Thank you," she said quietly between bites, "for staying, for helping. I do not usually accept help very easily, but I suppose I was in no condition to argue." "You would have argued anyway if you had the strength," Harrison said, and there was a hint of amusement in his voice. "Martha told me you are the most stubborn woman in Nevada, said you came out here 2 years ago from Philadelphia and set up this clinic with your own money, said you have treated everyone from miners to ranchers to Shoshone Indians, and you do not turn anyone away even if they cannot pay." "Martha talks too much," Penelope muttered, but she felt a rush of affection for her assistant. Martha was more than an employee. She was a friend, one of the few Penelope had made since coming west. "I do what I can. There is so much need out here, and so few people with medical training. When I heard that Eli had no doctor, no one to care for the sick and injured, I knew I had to come." "Why?" Harrison pulled another chair over and sat down across from her. His long legs stretched out in front of him, and Penelope found herself noticing things she had been too exhausted to see before. The way his shirt fit across his shoulders, the strong line of his jaw, the small scar above his left eyebrow. Why leave Philadelphia? Why come to a rough mining town in the middle of nowhere? Penelope took another bite of soup, considering how much to tell him. She did not usually share her story with strangers, but Harrison had earned some degree of trust. He had stayed. He had helped. He had cared for her patients when she could not. "I was engaged," she said finally, "to a doctor in Philadelphia. I met him while I was training as a nurse at the hospital. He was brilliant, accomplished, well-respected. Everyone said I was so fortunate to have won his affection." "But," Harrison prompted when she paused, "but he did not want a wife who worked. He wanted me to give up nursing once we married. He said it was not appropriate for a doctor's wife to be elbow-deep in blood and illness. He wanted me to host dinner parties and manage his household and produce children. All perfectly reasonable expectations for a wife, I suppose." Penelope stirred her soup, watching the vegetables swirl. "I tried to agree to it. I tried to convince myself that I could be happy in that role. But every time I thought about giving up nursing, about never helping another patient, I felt like I was suffocating." "So you broke the engagement?" "He broke it, actually, when I told him I could not give up my work. He said I was selfish and unfeminine. He said no other man would want a wife who insisted on such unladylike pursuits. My parents were devastated. They had been so proud that I was marrying a doctor. After the scandal, I could not stay in Philadelphia. Everyone knew. Everyone whispered. So I took the money my grandmother had left me and I came west. I heard there were places out here desperate for anyone with medical knowledge. Ely needed help, and I needed a fresh start." Harrison was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes studying her face. "He was a fool," he said finally. "Any man who would ask you to give up your calling, to deny who you are, is not worthy of you. What you do here, the lives you save, that is a gift. That is who you are. Someone who loves you should celebrate that, not try to diminish it." The words hit Penelope harder than she expected. In the 2 years since her broken engagement, no one had said anything like that to her. Her parents had written occasionally, cool letters filled with gentle reproaches about her choices. The people of Ely appreciated her work certainly, but they also looked at her with a mixture of respect and unease. She was an unmarried woman living alone, doing work that most people considered inappropriate for her sex. She had accepted the isolation as the price of her independence. But hearing Harrison's simple statement of support made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Thank you," she managed. "That means more than you know." "I mean it." Harrison leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I grew up on a ranch in Colorado. My mother was one of the toughest people I ever knew. She could birth a calf, mend a fence, and shoot a rattlesnake all before breakfast. When my father died from a riding accident when I was 10, she kept the ranch running for 5 more years before drought forced us to sell. She taught me that strength comes in many forms, and that women are just as capable as men if given the chance. I have never understood why society insists on keeping women locked in parlors when they have so much to offer the world." Penelope found herself warming to this stranger in a way she had not warmed to anyone in a very long time. There was something refreshingly honest about Harrison Kane, something solid and dependable. He did not seem threatened by her competence. If anything, he seemed to admire it. "What happened after your mother sold the ranch?" "We moved to Denver. She married again, to a good man who owned a mercantile. I was 16 by then, restless and wanting to see the world. I started working with horses, trading and training. Found I had a knack for it. I've been moving around ever since, buying horses in one place and selling them in another. Never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots." He paused, and something flickered across his face, something that looked like loneliness. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have a place to call home again, but I suppose this life suits me well enough." "It sounds lonely," Penelope said softly. "It is," Harrison admitted, "but lonely is better than trapped. I tried settling down once, took a job running a stable in Santa Fe, Lasted 6 months before I felt like the walls were closing in. Some people are not meant to stay in one place, I suppose. They talked while Penelope finished her soup and bread. She learned that Harrison was 28, just 3 years older than her own 25. She learned that he had a sister in Denver and a brother who had moved to California. She learned that he had spent time with various Indian tribes, learning their ways with horses and medicine, and that he spoke some Shoshone and Paiute. He told her stories about his travels, about close calls with bandits and mountain lions, about the time he had been snowed in at a remote ranch for 3 weeks and learned to make the best sourdough biscuits in the territory. In return, Penelope found herself sharing more than she intended. She told him about her training in Philadelphia, about the first time she'd assisted in a surgery and known with absolute certainty what she wanted to do with her life. She told him about the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated field, about the doctors who had tried to discourage her and the nurses who had helped her anyway. She told him about the satisfaction of saving a life, about the grief of losing a patient despite her best efforts. "You care deeply," Harrison observed, "about every single person who comes through that door. That is why you pushed yourself so hard these past 2 days. You could not bear the thought of losing anyone else." "I lost 3 already," Penelope said, and the guilt she had been holding at bay came rushing back. 3 men died because I was not skilled enough, not fast enough, not good enough to save them. Or they died because their injuries were too severe for anyone to treat. Harrison reached across the space between them and took her hand. His palm was warm and rough against her softer skin. "You are one person, Penelope. You are not God. You cannot save everyone no matter how hard you try. The fact that you have saved as many as you have is remarkable. Those men in there, they are alive because of you. Their families still have their fathers and brothers and sons because you were here, because you worked until you dropped, because you cared enough to sacrifice your own health for theirs. Do not diminish that by focusing on the ones you could not save." Penelope realized she was crying, silent tears sliding down her cheeks. She had not allowed herself to cry since the accident. There had been no time for tears, no space for grief. But Harrison's words had broken through the wall she had built around her emotions, and everything came spilling out. The fear, the exhaustion, the terrible weight of responsibility. Harrison did not tell her to stop crying. He did not look uncomfortable or try to change the subject. He simply held her hand and let her cry until she had no tears left. When she finally wiped her eyes with her free hand, embarrassed by the display, he handed her a clean handkerchief from his pocket. "I am sorry," she said. "I do not usually fall apart like that." "You have earned the right to fall apart." Harrison released her hand, though she found herself missing the contact. "But now you need more rest. A few hours of sleep is not nearly enough. When was the last time you slept a full night?" "Before the accident, I suppose." "I have been working long hours because we have had an outbreak of dysentery in the Chinese camp on the edge of town. They do not always trust white doctors, but they have learned to trust me. I have been going there every day to help treat the sick children." Penelope stood up, her body protesting the movement. She was sore everywhere, her muscles stiff from tension and exhaustion. "But I cannot sleep more now. I need to check on everyone, make sure their wounds are clean, administer medications. Martha can handle that. She knows what needs to be done." "I know she can, but they are my responsibility. And I am making it my responsibility to ensure you do not kill yourself through neglect." Harrison stood as well, his height once again striking. He had to be at least a foot taller than her own 5 feet and 3 inches. "Here is what is going to happen. You are going to make your rounds, check on each patient, and give Martha instructions for the night. Then you are going to go to wherever you live, and you are going to sleep in a real bed for at least 8 hours. I will stay here tonight and help Martha. If there is an emergency, we will send someone to fetch you. But otherwise, you rest." "I live upstairs," Penelope said, gesturing to a narrow staircase in the corner that led to the small apartment above the clinic. "I'm never far from my patients." "Perfect. Then you have no excuse not to rest." Harrison crossed his arms again, and Penelope recognized the stance. This was not a man who would be easily swayed once he had made up his mind. "Make your rounds, Miss Harmon, then sleep." Penelope wanted to argue, but she was too tired and too grateful for his help. She moved through the clinic methodically, checking each patient, cleaning and rebandaging wounds, dispensing medications, offering words of comfort. The miners were doing well, all things considered. The worst cases were stable. The fevers were down. There had been no new crises while she slept, and knowing that eased some of her guilt, Martha assured her that she was capable of handling the night shift, especially with Harrison's help. "You have taught me well, Miss Harmon. I know what to watch for. And Mr. Kane seems quite competent. Between the two of us, we will keep everyone safe. Please, get some proper rest. You have earned it." Finally, with no more excuses left, Penelope climbed the stairs to her small apartment. It consisted of one main room that served as living space and bedroom, with a tiny kitchen area and a washroom barely big enough to turn around in. But it was hers, and it was clean, and right now the bed looked like paradise. She changed into a nightgown and washed her face and hands, scrubbing away the grime of the past 2 days. When she looked in the small mirror above the wash basin, she barely recognized herself. Her face was drawn, dark circles beneath her eyes making her look years older than 25. Her hair was a mess, strands falling from the bun she had pinned it into sometime during the first night. She climbed into bed and pulled the quilt up to her chin. Through the floorboards, she could hear the low murmur of voices from the clinic below, Harrison's deep tones mixing with Martha's lighter voice. The sound was strangely comforting. For 2 days she had carried the burden alone. Now, for the first time since the accident, she could let go. Someone else was watching. Someone else was helping. She was not alone. Sleep claimed her quickly, and this time there were no nightmares, no anxiety dreams about patients she could not save. She slept deeply and dreamlessly, her body finally getting the rest it so desperately needed. When Penelope woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the window and birds were singing. She lay still for a moment, disoriented. What time was it? How long had she slept? She pushed herself up and looked at the clock on the small table beside her bed. 9 in the morning. She had slept for nearly 12 hours. Panic seized her immediately, and she threw back the covers and dressed quickly, not bothering to pin up her hair properly. Her patients needed her. How could she have slept so long? She rushed down the stairs, her heart pounding, expecting chaos. Once again, what she found was not what she expected. The clinic was quiet and orderly. Several of the patients had been moved, she realized. The most critical cases were still there, but some of the men with minor injuries had apparently been sent home or moved to the boarding house to recuperate. The air smelled of fresh bread and coffee rather than blood and sweat. Harrison was sitting beside one of the miners, talking quietly. When he saw Penelope, he stood and walked over to meet her. He looked tired, she noticed. His eyes were red-rimmed and there was stubble on his jaw. He'd been up all night. "Good morning," he said. "You look much better. How do you feel?" "Guilty," Penelope admitted. "I cannot believe I slept so long. I should have been down here helping." "You were sleeping, which is exactly what you needed to be doing. Everything here has been fine. No emergencies. Martha is at the boarding house getting some rest herself. The cook from the restaurant brought breakfast for everyone. Half the patients have been discharged to continue recovering at home or with family. The ones who remain are stable." Harrison gestured around the room. "You did it, Penelope. You saved them. Now stop feeling guilty and accept that you accomplished something remarkable." Penelope walked through the clinic, checking on each remaining patient. Harrison was right. They were all doing well. The fevers had broken. The wounds were clean. The pain seemed more manageable. These men would recover, and she had helped make that possible. The realization made her eyes sting with tears again, but these were tears of relief rather than grief. "Thank you," she said to Harrison when she had finished her rounds, "for everything, for making me stop and rest, for staying all night to help, for caring about people you do not even know? I do not know how I can repay you. You could start by having breakfast with me." Harrison picked up his hat from the peg by the door. "I have been up all night and I am starving. There is a restaurant down the street that supposedly serves the best steak and eggs in Nevada. Join me?" Penelope hesitated. She should stay at the clinic. She should be available in case something happened. But the patients were stable, and she was hungry, and the thought of spending more time with Harrison made something warm unfurl in her chest. "Let me check upstairs to see if I have any messages. If not, then yes, I would like that." There were no urgent messages waiting, and Martha had left a note saying she would return by noon. Penelope pinned up her hair properly, changed into a clean dress, and met Harrison outside. The morning air was already warm, promising another hot day, but it felt wonderful after 2 days trapped inside the stuffy clinic. The restaurant was busy with miners and ranchers getting breakfast before heading to work. Several people called out greetings to Penelope as she entered, thanking her for her work with the accident victims. She smiled and nodded, still not entirely comfortable with the attention, but grateful for the support. Harrison found them a table in the corner, away from the noise. He ordered steak and eggs and coffee. Penelope ordered the same, her appetite stronger than it had been in days. While they waited for the food, Harrison told her about the night in the clinic. One of the miners had woken with nightmares about the explosion. Another had asked Harrison to write a letter to his wife in California. A third had cried, overcome with emotion at still being alive. "You have a gift for this," Penelope observed, "for caring for people. You said you learned from a Paiute medicine man? His name was Gray Wolf. I was wintering near his camp 5 years ago. My horse had injured his leg, and I did not want to travel until he healed. Gray Wolf took an interest in me, taught me about plants and herbs and healing techniques his people had used for generations. I only spent 1 season with him, but I learned more in those months than I could have learned in years elsewhere." Harrison paused as their food arrived. "He told me that healing is as much about caring for the spirit as the body, that a patient who feels seen and valued will recover faster than one who is treated as just another injury to be fixed." "I believe that," Penelope said. She cut into her steak, savoring the flavor. "When I was training in Philadelphia, some of the doctors would talk about patients as if they were not even human, just interesting cases or routine procedures. I hated that. Every person who comes to me for help has a story, a family, a life. They deserve to be treated with dignity and compassion." "That is why people trust you," Harrison said. "That is why you have built something important here in Ely. You do not just treat injuries and illnesses, you treat people." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and Penelope found herself studying Harrison when she thought he was not looking. He had strong features, not classically handsome perhaps, but appealing in a rugged, lived-in way. There was a steadiness about him, a quiet confidence that she found attractive. He did not seem to need to fill every silence with words. He was comfortable just being present. "How long are you staying in Ely?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual. She told herself it was simple curiosity, but part of her already dreaded his answer. Harrison was a drifter. He had said so himself. He never stayed anywhere long. "I was planning to leave today, actually. I have a buyer for my horses waiting in Carson City, but—" He paused, his dark eyes meeting hers. "But I find myself reluctant to leave. Not yet. Not until I am sure you are fully recovered and your patients are out of danger." Penelope's heart did an odd little skip in her chest. "That could be days," she said. "Even a week or more. Some of those injuries will take time to heal properly." "Then I suppose I will be in Ely for a week or more." Harrison smiled, and the expression transformed his face. "Unless you want me to leave sooner?" "No," Penelope said, perhaps too quickly. "No, I would like you to stay. If you are willing to continue helping at the clinic, I could certainly use the assistance and the company." "Then it is settled. I will send a telegram to the buyer in Carson City explaining the delay. He will understand." Harrison reached across the table and touched her hand briefly. "Besides, I want to make sure you actually continue to eat and sleep properly. Someone needs to watch over you since you clearly do not watch over yourself." "I resent that, Penelope said, but she was smiling. "I am perfectly capable of caring for myself." "You worked for 48 hours straight without food or rest. Forgive me if I question your judgment when it comes to self-care." They finished breakfast and walked back to the clinic together. The streets of Ely were bustling with activity. Wagons rolled by, loaded with ore from the mines. Cowboys on horseback tipped their hats to Penelope. Children ran past laughing and chasing each other. It was a rough town, still in the process of growing and finding its identity, but there was also a sense of community here that Penelope had come to appreciate. People looked out for each other. They might be miners and ranchers and merchants, but they were also neighbors. Back at the clinic, Martha had returned and was thrilled to learn that Harrison would be staying to help. "He has magic hands, why?" she told Penelope enthusiastically. "Last night one of the miners was in terrible pain, and Mr. Kane did something with pressure points that helped relieve it. And he kept everyone calm when young Tommy started panicking about his injured leg. He is a natural healer." "I just do what I can," Harrison said, looking embarrassed by the praise. "Penelope is the real healer here. I am just an extra set of hands." Over the following days, Harrison became an integral part of the clinic's operation. He proved to be surprisingly knowledgeable about medical care, with skills that went far beyond basic first aid. He could set bones, stitch wounds, and mix herbal remedies that Penelope had never encountered before. He was patient with difficult patients, gentle with those in pain, and efficient with routine tasks like changing bandages and dispensing medications. But more than his medical skills, what Penelope came to value was his presence. For 2 years, she had run the clinic alone, with only Martha to help. It had been exhausting, overwhelming at times, and intensely lonely. Having Harrison there changed everything. When a difficult case came in, she could consult with him, get another perspective. When she was tired, he would insist she take a break while he took over. When she doubted herself, he would remind her of her skills and her successes. They fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings were for rounds and treating any new patients who came in. Afternoons were for follow-up care and restocking supplies. Evenings, after Martha had gone home, Harrison and Penelope would sit together in the clinic and talk. Sometimes they discussed medical cases. More often, they shared stories about their lives, their dreams, their fears. Penelope learned that Harrison had been in love once, years ago, with a banker's daughter in Colorado, but her family had considered him unsuitable, just a poor ranch boy with no prospects. She had married someone else, someone appropriate, and Harrison had left Colorado to escape the memories. He told the story without bitterness, but Penelope could hear the old pain beneath the words. "I told myself I would never let anyone matter that much again," he admitted one evening. They were sitting on the front steps of the clinic, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Easier to keep moving, never get attached. Cannot get your heart broken if you never give it away. "That sounds like a very lonely way to live," Penelope said softly. "It is, but safe." Harrison was quiet for a moment, then turned to look at her. In the golden light of sunset, his eyes seemed to glow. "At least it was safe until I met you." Penelope's breath caught. There was something in his gaze, something intense and vulnerable that made her heart race. "Harrison, I know I said I would stay until your patients recovered. They are all doing well now. Most of them have gone home. The last few will be released in the next day or two. I should leave. I should get back on the road, head to Carson City, keep moving like I always do." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch infinitely gentle. "But I do not want to leave, Penelope. I do not want to leave you." "Then stay," she whispered. The words came from somewhere deep inside her, from a place that had been locked away since her broken engagement. She had told herself she did not need anyone, that her work was enough. But that had been a lie, she realized now. She had been lonely too, hiding behind her dedication to her patients, because it was easier than risking her heart again. "Stay in Ely, stay with me. If I stay, it will not be as an assistant or a friend." Harrison cupped her face in his hands, his palms warm against her skin. "I am falling in love with you, Penelope Harmon. I think I have been falling since the moment I walked into your clinic and saw you swaying on your feet but refusing to quit. You are the strongest, most dedicated, most remarkable woman I have ever met. And if I stay, I will want everything. Not just your time or your companionship. I will want your heart." "You already have it," Penelope said, and realized it was true. Somewhere in the past week, between the shared meals and the long conversations and the quiet moments of working side by side, she had fallen in love with this wandering horse trader who had insisted she stop and eat and sleep. "I love you, Harrison. I did not think I could feel this way again. I did not think I wanted to, but you make me want to take the risk." Harrison kissed her then, soft and careful, as if she was something precious that might break. Penelope leaned into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beating fast, matching the rhythm of her own. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more passionate. Years of loneliness and longing poured into that kiss, all the walls they had both built around their hearts crumbling in the face of this overwhelming connection. When they finally pulled apart, both, breathing hard, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. "I will stay," he said. "I will stay in Ely. I will build a life here with you if you will have me. No more running, no more drifting, just you and me and this dusty mining town in the middle of Nevada." "I will have you," Penelope said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Harrison, yes to all of it." They sat on the steps as the stars came out, planning their future. Harrison could continue to work with horses, he said. There was always demand for good stock, and he knew enough about breeding and training to establish a successful business. He could help at the clinic too, especially with difficult cases or when Penelope needed an extra set of hands. They could build a life together that honored both their callings. "I will not ask you to give up your work," Harrison said firmly. "Your healing, your clinic, it is part of who you are. Any life we build together will include that. I will support you in it, help you when I can, and never, ever ask you to choose between your work and our relationship." "That means everything to me," Penelope said. "My last engagement ended because he wanted me to give up nursing. I cannot do that, Harrison. This work, these patients, they are part of my soul." "I know. And I love that about you. I love your dedication and your compassion and the way you pour everything you have into helping others." Harrison kissed her forehead. "Just promise me you will also take care of yourself, that you will eat and sleep and let me help carry the burden when it gets too heavy." "I promise," Penelope said, "as long as you promise to stay, to really stay, not just for now, but for always." "I promise. You are my home now, Penelope. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Harrison found a small ranch property on the edge of town, 20 acres with a barn and corrals perfect for his horse trading business. He bought it with money he had saved from years on the road and immediately began making improvements. Penelope spent her days at the clinic, but her evenings were with Harrison, helping him fix fences and paint the barn and plan for the future. They were married 2 months after they met, in a simple ceremony at the church in Ely. Martha stood up as Penelope's witness, and the blacksmith, a friend of Harrison's, served as his. Half the town turned out for the celebration afterward. The miners who Penelope had treated in the accident were there, healthy and whole and grateful. The Chinese families from the camp came, bringing gifts of silk and tea. Even some of the Shoshone people Harrison had worked with over the years made the journey to wish them well. "I never thought I would have this," Penelope said that night as they stood together in the house on Harrison's ranch, their ranch now. "A partner who understands me. A love that does not ask me to be less than I am. A home." "You deserve all of it and more," Harrison said, pulling her close. "You deserve the world, Penelope Kane." "Mrs. Kane," she said, testing out the name. "It sounds strange after being Miss Harmon for so long, but I like it. I like being yours." "And I like being yours." Harrison kissed her, slow and sweet. "Always." Their life together found a comfortable rhythm. Penelope continued to run her clinic, treating everyone who came through her doors regardless of their ability to pay. Harrison built up his horse trading business, developing a reputation for fair dealing and quality stock. He also became known as someone who could help with medical emergencies, especially injuries involving animals or accidents on the trail. They supported each other through challenges. When Penelope had a difficult case that haunted her, Harrison was there to listen and comfort. When Harrison struggled with the transition from wandering life to settled existence, Penelope reminded him of all the reasons he had chosen to stay. They argued sometimes, as all couples do, but they always talked through their disagreements with respect and love. A year after their marriage, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had always wanted children, but she also worried about how she would manage the clinic while caring for an infant. Harrison, sensing her concerns, immediately began making plans. "We will hire another nurse," he said. "Someone you can train to handle routine cases when you need to be home with the baby. And I will cut back on my trading trips, stay closer to home so I can help more. This child will be ours to raise together, Penelope. You will not have to choose between being a mother and being a healer. You can be both." "You make it sound so simple," she said, but she felt the fear easing. With Harrison beside her, anything seemed possible. Their son was born in the spring of 1884 after a long but uncomplicated labor. Harrison stayed with Penelope throughout, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, encouraging her when she was exhausted and ready to give up. When the baby finally arrived, healthy and squalling with indignation, Harrison cried openly, overcome with emotion. "He is perfect," he said, cradling the tiny bundle with surprising confidence for a first-time father. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They named him James, after Penelope's father, hoping the gesture might begin to heal the rift that still existed between Penelope and her parents. It worked. 2 months later, a letter arrived from Philadelphia asking if they could visit their grandson. It was the first warm communication Penelope had received from her family since leaving the East. Her parents came west that summer, and though the visit was initially awkward, they were won over by Harrison's genuine kindness and the clear love between him and Penelope. Her mother admitted tearfully that she had been wrong to judge Penelope's choices so harshly. "You have built a good life here," she said, looking around the ranch and the nearby clinic. "You are helping people, making a real difference. And Harrison, he treats you like you are a treasure. Your father and I thought you were throwing your life away when you came west, but we can see now that you found exactly where you belong." The reconciliation with her family was another piece of happiness Penelope had not expected. She maintained a regular correspondence with her parents after that visit, sending photographs of James as he grew and letters about her work at the clinic. Life was not without its challenges. The winter James turned one, a severe pneumonia outbreak hit Ely. Penelope worked around the clock, with Harrison managing both the baby and helping at the clinic. They lost 3 patients, including a young girl Penelope had treated since she was an infant. The grief nearly broke her, but Harrison was there, holding her while she cried, reminding her of all the lives she had saved, helping her process the inevitable losses that came with being a healer. "You cannot save everyone," he told her gently, echoing the words he had said years before. "But the ones you do save, their lives continue because of you. That little girl's death is tragic, but the 20 other people who survived the pneumonia, they get to keep living because you were here. Do not let the losses overshadow the victories." When James was 3, Penelope became pregnant again. This time a daughter arrived, a tiny red-faced baby with Harrison's dark eyes and Penelope's stubborn determination. They named her Rose, and she quickly proved to be even more headstrong than her brother. The clinic continued to grow. With the second nurse they had hired, a young woman named Sarah, who had come west from Missouri, Penelope was able to expand services. They added a small surgery room and began handling more complex cases. Word spread that the clinic in Ely could handle medical emergencies that would require a trip to Salt Lake City or even San Francisco, anywhere else. Patients traveled from across Nevada and even from neighboring states to seek treatment. Harrison's horse business thrived as well. He developed a breeding program that produced strong, intelligent animals perfectly suited to the harsh conditions of the Nevada territory. He never traveled far from home anymore, preferring to have buyers come to him so he could stay close to his family. "I do not miss the wandering," he told Penelope one evening as they sat on the porch of their ranch house watching James and Rose play in the yard. "I thought I needed the open road, the freedom to go wherever I wanted. But this, right here, this is the truest freedom I have ever known. The freedom to build something lasting, the freedom to love and be loved, the freedom to watch my children grow, the freedom to wake up every morning next to the woman I adore." "You do have a way with words, Mr. Kane," Penelope said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Who would have thought the wandering horse trader would turn out to be such a romantic?" "You bring it out in me," Harrison said, kissing the top of her head. "You always have." As the years passed, James grew into a serious, studious boy who showed an interest in medicine. He would spend hours at the clinic, watching his mother work, asking endless questions about anatomy and treatment. Rose, on the other hand, was fascinated by the horses. By the time she was 5, she could ride better than most grown men, and she had Harrison's gift for communicating with the animals. "I think James will follow in your footstep," Harrison observed when their son was 10. "He has your compassion and your dedication. He will make an excellent doctor someday if that is the path he chooses." "And Rose will follow in yours," Penelope said. "She has your fearlessness and your way with horses. Heaven help any man who tries to tell her she cannot do something because she is a woman. She has inherited my stubbornness." They had 2 more children in the following years, another son named Thomas and a daughter named Elizabeth. The house was full of noise and laughter and occasional chaos, but it was everything Penelope had never known she wanted. She had thought her life would be defined by her work, by the patients she treated, and the lives she saved. She had not expected this abundance of love, this richness of family. The clinic became a fixture in Ely's community. Over the years, 3 more doctors moved to the area, attracted by the mining boom, but Penelope remained the most trusted healer in town. She had been there from the beginning. She had proven herself countless times over. People knew that she would treat anyone, regardless of race, religion, or ability to pay. The Chinese families, the Shoshone and Paiute people, the Mexican laborers who worked the mines, they all knew they would find compassion and competent care at Penelope's clinic. Harrison never lost his respect and admiration for his wife's work. Even after 20 years of marriage, he would still show up at the clinic occasionally with food, insisting she stop and eat. He never interfered with her medical decisions, but he was always there to support her, to help with difficult cases, to comfort her when she experienced losses. "You were right, you know," Penelope told him one evening. They were in their bedroom, getting ready for sleep. Through the window, she could see the stars blazing in the clear Nevada sky. "That first day when you walked into my clinic and made me stop and eat and sleep. You said I was no good to my patients if I worked myself to death. You were right. I needed someone to take care of me so I could take care of others." "We take care of each other," Harrison said, climbing into bed beside her. After all these years, the sight of him still made her heart beat faster. "That is what love is, Penelope. Supporting each other, strengthening each other, being each other's safe place in a difficult world." "I love you," she said, snuggling against his chest. "I have loved you since that first day, even though I was too exhausted and stubborn to admit it. And I have loved you since I saw you swaying on your feet but refusing to quit," Harrison said. "My stubborn, dedicated, remarkable wife. I am the luckiest man in Nevada." As they drifted off to sleep, Penelope thought about the path that had brought her here, the broken engagement that had seemed like the end of her world, the decision to come west, to build a new life in a rough mining town, the mining accident that had pushed her past her limits, and Harrison walking through the door at exactly the right moment, refusing to let her destroy herself through neglect. She had thought she did not need anyone. She had thought independence meant doing everything alone. But Harrison had taught her that true strength came from allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to accept help, to share the burden. Together, they had built something beautiful, a family, a life, a love that had sustained them through challenges and celebrated with them through triumphs. The clinic continued to thrive. James did indeed follow in his mother's footsteps, eventually going to medical school in San Francisco before returning to Ely to practice alongside Penelope. Rose married a rancher and became one of the most successful horse breeders in the state, working closely with Harrison. Thomas became a lawyer, fighting for the rights of miners and other workers. Elizabeth became a teacher, educating the children of Ely in a new schoolhouse that had been built near the center of town. Penelope and Harrison grew old together, their hair turning gray, their faces weathering like the Nevada landscape they loved. But their love never dimmed. Every day, Harrison would still stop by the clinic to make sure Penelope had eaten lunch. Every evening they would sit together on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset and talking about their day. They held hands like young lovers, still finding comfort and joy in each other's presence. When Penelope finally retired from active practice at the age of 65, she handed the clinic over to James with complete confidence. He had trained well, combining Penelope's compassion with his own scientific curiosity. The clinic would continue to serve the community for generations to come. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. It was a warm summer evening, the kind of perfect night that Nevada sometimes offered between the harsh heat of day and the cool darkness of night. There was food and music and laughter. The grandchildren ran through the yard playing the same games their parents had played years before. Rose's horses grazed peacefully in the nearby corrals. Harrison stood up to make a toast, his voice still strong despite his 72 years. 40 years ago, I rode into Ely planning to stay for one night. Maybe two if the business was good. I was a wanderer, convinced that freedom meant never staying in one place, never letting anyone get too close. And then I walked into a clinic and saw a woman who had worked herself nearly to death trying to save a group of injured miners, a woman so dedicated to her calling that she had forgotten to eat, forgotten to sleep, forgotten that she was human and had limits. He turned to look at Penelope, his eyes shining with love. I made her stop. I made her eat. I made her sleep. And in doing so, she saved me. Because in taking care of her, I discovered what I had been searching for all those years on the road. I found purpose. I found home. I found love. Penelope Harmon, who became Penelope Kane, you are the greatest adventure of my life. Every day with you has been a gift. Thank you for letting a wandering horse trader stay. Thank you for sharing your life with me. Thank you for 40 years of love and laughter and partnership. There was not a dry eye in the gathering as Harrison raised his glass. To my wife, my partner, my love, to 40 years, and to however many more we are blessed to have. Penelope stood and kissed him, not caring that their children and grandchildren were watching, not caring about anything except showing this man how much she loved him. When they finally pulled apart, she turned to address the gathering. I came west broken-hearted and alone, she said. I thought I would spend my life serving others, and that would be enough. I did not believe I would ever find love again, and I told myself I did not need it. But then a stubborn cowboy walked into my clinic and refused to leave until I took care of myself. He taught me that needing someone is not weakness, that accepting help is not failure, that love does not diminish us but completes us. She took Harrison's hand, marveling at how perfectly it still fit in hers after all these years. Harrison Kane, you are my heart. You always have been from that very first day. Thank you for making me stop. Thank you for making me see that I deserved rest and care and love. Thank you for 40 years of being my partner in every sense of the word. I love you more today than I did on the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise to you, for whatever time we have left. They sat down together amidst the applause and cheers of their family. James stood to share a story about his childhood, about watching his parents work together at the clinic, and learning what true partnership looked like. Rose talked about the lessons she had learned from both her father's gentleness with horses and her mother's dedication to healing. Thomas and Elizabeth shared their own memories, painting a picture of a childhood filled with love and laughter, and parents who showed by example what a good marriage could be. As the celebration continued into the night, Penelope leaned against Harrison's shoulder, exactly as she had done on that first evening when they had admitted their feelings for each other. The years had changed them in many ways, adding gray hair and wrinkles and the aches and pains of age. But in the ways that mattered most, they were the same. Still in love, still partners, still each other's home. "I would do it all again," Harrison murmured, his lips brushing her temple. "Every single moment, even the hard parts, even the scary parts, all of it led us here, to this life we have built together." "So would I," Penelope agreed. "I used to think that leaving Philadelphia and coming west was the bravest thing I ever did, but I was wrong. The bravest thing I ever did was let you into my heart, letting myself love again after being hurt, trusting someone new with the most vulnerable parts of myself. That took more courage than I knew I had. But it was worth it. You were worth it. This life we built together was worth every risk." They sat together as the stars came out, surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had nurtured for 4 decades. Harrison had been right that first day. She had needed to stop. She had needed to eat and sleep and let someone care for her. But more than that, she had needed to open her heart, to let love in, to discover that being strong did not mean facing everything alone. The years continued to pass gently. Penelope and Harrison grew older but never apart. They took up new hobbies, spent time with their ever-growing number of grandchildren, and enjoyed the slower pace of life that came with retirement. Penelope still consulted at the clinic occasionally, unable to fully give up her calling, and Harrison still worked with the horses, though he let Rose handle most of the day-to-day operations. They celebrated their 50th anniversary surrounded by 3 generations of family. By then, they had 12 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren. The ranch had expanded, and the clinic had become a small hospital with multiple doctors and nurses. The legacy they had built together stretched far beyond their own lives, touching everyone in the community. On a warm autumn evening when Penelope was 75 and Harrison was 78, they sat together on their porch watching the sunset as they had done thousands of times before. Harrison had been quieter than usual lately, moving more slowly, tiring more easily. Penelope, with her medical training, knew what that meant, but she pushed the knowledge away. She was not ready. She would never be ready. "Do you remember the day we met?" Harrison asked, his hand clasped in hers. "You were the most stubborn woman I had ever encountered, swaying on your feet, but still insisting you did not need help." "You were pretty stubborn yourself," Penelope said, smiling at the memory, "refusing to leave, taking away my scissors, ordering me around in my own clinic. I should have thrown you out." "You should have," Harrison agreed, "but you did not. You let me stay. You let me help. You let me love you. Best decision you ever made." "Second best," Penelope corrected. "The best decision was loving you back." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The colors were so vivid they seemed unreal, like something from a painting rather than life. Penelope thought about all the sunsets they had watched together, all the mornings they had woken up side by side, all the moments both monumental and mundane that had made up their life together. "I am tired," Harrison said softly. "Not just tonight. Deep down tired. The kind that does not go away with rest." Penelope's throat tightened, but she forced herself to speak calmly. "I know. I have known for a while." "I am not afraid," Harrison said. "How could I be afraid when I have had such a full, rich life? I have loved and been loved. I have children and grandchildren who make me proud every day. I have done work that mattered. And I have had 53 years with you. 53 years, Penelope. That is more than most people get. That is a gift." "It is not enough," Penelope whispered. "It will never be enough. I want 53 more years. I want forever." "You will have forever," Harrison said, turning to face her. Even now, with age and illness dulling his strength, his eyes were still bright with love. "You will have it in the children we raised and the grandchildren who carry our stories forward. You will have it in the patients you healed and the lives you saved. You will have it in every sunset you watch and every breath you take, because I will be there with you, Penelope, always. Death cannot separate what we have built together. Our love is stronger than that." Penelope was crying now, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "I do not know how to be without you." "Yes, you do. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You will grieve, and that is right and natural. But you will also live. You will keep helping people. You will keep being there for our family. You will keep being the remarkable woman I fell in love with 53 years ago." Harrison wiped her tears with his thumb. "Promise me, Penelope, promise me you will keep living, really living, not just existing." "I promise," she managed. "But I need you to know, Harrison Kane, that loving you has been the greatest joy of my life. You made me whole. You made me better. Every good thing in my life came from that day you walked into my clinic and refused to let me work myself to death. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." Harrison pulled her close, and they sat together as the sun finally disappeared below the horizon and the first stars appeared. They did not speak again that evening. They did not need to. Everything that mattered had been said, not just in words, but in 53 years of shared moments, of love given and received, of a partnership that had weathered every storm. Harrison passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks later, Penelope holding his hand. The entire town of Ely mourned his loss. The funeral was one of the largest the town had ever seen, with people traveling from across the state to pay their respects. Stories were shared about Harrison's kindness, his integrity, his skill with horses, his dedication to his family and community. But through it all, Penelope remembered her promise. She grieved deeply, the loss cutting through her like a physical wound. But she also lived. She spent time with her children and grandchildren, sharing stories about Harrison, keeping his memory alive. She continued to consult at the clinic, finding comfort in the familiar routines of healing. She kept the ranch running, though Rose did most of the heavy work. And every evening she sat on the porch and watched the sunset, talking to Harrison as if he was still beside her, because in a way, he was. She could feel his presence in the warm evening breeze, in the sound of horses in the corrals, in the laughter of their grandchildren playing in the yard. He had been right. Death had not separated them. Their love was stronger than that. Penelope lived another 10 years, long enough to see great-great-grandchildren born, long enough to celebrate the hospital's expansion into a modern medical facility, long enough to watch James train the next generation of doctors. She remained sharp and active until the very end, still offering medical advice, still sharing stories, still radiating the strength and compassion that had defined her life. On the evening before she died, Penelope gathered her family around her. She was 85 years old, her body finally wearing out, but her mind was clear and her spirit was strong. James sat on one side of her bed, Rose on the other. Thomas and Elizabeth stood at the foot. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren filled the room. "I want to tell you all something," she said, her voice weak but determined. "Your grandfather, your great-grandfather, he taught me one of the most important lessons of my life. He taught me that accepting help is not weakness, that needing someone is not failure, that love does not diminish us but completes us. I was so stubborn when I was young, so convinced I had to do everything alone, but Harrison showed me a better way." She looked around the room at the faces of the family she and Harrison had created. Love each other, support each other, Do not be afraid to ask for help when you need it, and when you see someone struggling, do not wait for them to ask. Step in, help them. Make them stop and eat and sleep if they are working too hard. Care for each other the way your grandfather cared for me." Rose was crying openly now. "We will, Mama. We promise." "Good." Penelope smiled, feeling a bone-deep weariness that she recognized. "I am tired now. The same kind of tired your grandfather talked about all those years ago, but I am not afraid. How could I be afraid when I know Harrison is waiting for me? We had 53 beautiful years together in this life, and now we will have eternity." She closed her eyes, still smiling, and took her last breath surrounded by the love she and Harrison had nurtured for more than half a century. The family gathered around her wept, but they also celebrated because Penelope Kane had lived a full, rich, meaningful life. She had healed countless people. She had built a thriving medical practice that served her community. She had raised 4 children who went on to make their own positive marks on the world, and she had loved deeply and been loved in return. At her funeral, James stood to deliver the eulogy. "My mother was one of the strongest people I have ever known," he said. "But she would tell you that her strength came from my father, from the partnership they built together. She taught me that true strength is not about doing everything alone. It is about building a life with someone who supports you, who challenges you, who makes you better." She and my father were partners in every sense of the word, and the love they shared was the foundation for everything good in our family. Penelope was buried next to Harrison on the ranch they had built together. The headstone was simple but elegant, bearing both their names and the dates that marked their time on Earth. But beneath those facts was an inscription that Rose had chosen. She worked through 2 days without stopping. He made her stop and eat and sleep, and in that stopping, they found love. Years later, when their great-great-grandchildren would visit the grave, they would hear the story of how Penelope and Harrison met. They would hear about the mining accident, about the stubborn nurse who refused to rest, about the wandering cowboy who insisted she take care of herself. They would hear about the love that grew from that first meeting, a love that sustained 2 people through 53 years of marriage and beyond. The clinic that Penelope founded continued to operate for generations, eventually becoming a major hospital serving all of eastern Nevada. The horse ranch that Harrison established remained in the family, producing quality stock that was sought after throughout the West. The children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren carried forward the lessons they had learned from Penelope and Harrison, lessons about dedication, compassion, partnership, and love. But perhaps the most important legacy was the simplest one. In Ely, Nevada, for generations after Penelope and Harrison had passed, people would tell the story of the nurse and the cowboy. They would tell it to remind themselves that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is insist they stop and take care of themselves. They would tell it to show that true love supports rather than diminishes, strengthens rather than weakens. They would tell it to prove that sometimes the person who seems like an interruption is actually exactly what you need. And on warm summer evenings, when the sun painted the Nevada sky in impossible colors, people in Ely would sit on their porches and watch the sunset. And if the evening breeze felt especially gentle, they would smile and think of Penelope and Harrison, 2 people who had found love in the most unexpected way and had built something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. Their story became part of the town's history, a reminder that even in the harsh landscape of the Old West, love could bloom and thrive and create something lasting. The ranch still stands, maintained now by the 6th generation of Kanes. The hospital still serves the community, bearing Penelope's name on a plaque in the lobby. And in the small cemetery on the hill outside of town, 2 headstones stand side by side, marking the resting place of a remarkable couple who proved that sometimes the greatest love stories begin when someone makes you stop and eat and sleep. And in that moment of care, 2 hearts find each other and choose to build a life together that will echo through generations, a testament to the enduring power of love, partnership, and 2 people who found in each other everything they had been searching for without even knowing it.